Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to start this Moed Katan daf Chaf. We are going to begin on Yud Testament base, 6 lines from the bottom. So as we've been discussing regarding the dinim of regel, if the person died and is buried before the regel, so the regel cancels out Shiva, it also has the potential of canceling out Shloshim. So the Gemara here says that what happens if a person is buried during the regel itself, let's say on Chol Moed. So regel oil minyan shloishim o ein regel oil minyan shloishim. So laminyan shiva lomakaboilim. There's not a question when it comes to shiva. The loy nahagim mitzvah shiva beregel. We know that there's no din of shiva when it comes to the regel. You can't keep shiva, and therefore what ends up happening is you actually have to wait until after the regel is completely finished, and then you actually start sitting Shiva, which again is a little bit of a challenge of how a person does that, because you're v'samachta b'chagecha, but even though you know that in the future you have to sit Shiva, but that's the halacha. Kikam aboyli l'minyan shloishim, dekon nahagim mitzvah shloishim b'regel mai, because there is an element of mitzvah shloishim on the regel, says Rashi, davar regel nami aser b'gihutz. There's certain things that you can't do during the Moed. You're not allowed to get haircuts, not supposed to do laundry, things of that nature. So perhaps because there's this element of shloshim that is noyig, it's not because of avelus, it's because everyone has that din. So perhaps shloshim does count. So amalei enu oil, it doesn't. So Gemara, is that true? So person who buries his dead shnei yomim kodim regel, 2 days before, mayne chamisha yomim acha regel, umalachto nasas alidei acherim. So what we ended up saying before is it had in the Mishnah is you have to actually be 3 days before. You have to sit Shiva for 3 days, and then that's it. Then the regel is canceled. We'll cancel the Shiva. However, this is saying that because it was done only 2 days before, so you end up having to do 5 after the regel. That the malacha can be done alidei acherim. You're not supposed to do malacha, someone who's in Shiva. You can have workers do it for you privately, but talk based on your house. Which means that let's look on Rashi. You do not require, there's no more avelus as far as nichum avelum after Yom Tiv, since it does count on some regard. Says Rashi Shikbar nichamuhu shiva yomim beregel. So there's a form of consolement and comfort during that time. So it's an interesting idea. But look at this Taisa says at the end, it doesn't mean you can obviously have them do whatever, but when we allowed you to do work on Chol HaMoed for Davar Avid, a loss, so as an Avel, we're going to allow you to have someone else do that for you. As we continue in Daf Chav, Shikvar Nis Askubo Beregel, because it was already took place during the regel, and therefore a person does not have any more divrei nechama after the regel, even though you still do have to finish up, let's say, the next 5 days after the regel of Shiva. Klal shadavar, kol shu mishum evel, anything which is connected to avelus regel mafsikoi. So the regel will stop it, says Rashi. Shesarch lashlimo acha regel. You have to complete it afterwards. Kivan dechi yoshiv shnei yomim lifnei regel. So that's all you did was sit 2 days of Shiva before the holiday. Sarach lahashlim v'leishim chamisha yomim acha regel. As we said, you have to complete it by sitting 5 days after the regel. B'chol shehu mishum iski rabim ein regel mafsiko. Something which is iski rabim, says Rashi, kiloimer tanchumi rabim ein regel mafsiko. Kedei shehi sarach lahashlim v'asik b'oi acha regel. Ella misaskin boy beregel. So basically, it's an interesting dynamic that you are sitting Shiva, but there's no nachama as is a normal Shiva house. Let's say he was the person was buried 3 days b'soifa regel. So minus Shiva achar regel. So what we do is we count only after the regel. Arba yomim harishainim, the first 4 days, Rab misaskin boy. So there's divrei nechama. Shloisha yomim achreinim, the next 3 days, Ein Rabbi misaskin bo shekavar nisaskin beregel v'regel oilolo my lava seifa. So it says pretty clearly that, as we see in Rashi, ha detani beregel oila minyan shleishim, that the regel counts for 30. Haidu aseifa cover beregel, that if a person was buried during the regel, we see clearly that shloshim counts. V'tivsha mina the chikaver beregel oila minyan shleishim, that it counts as shleishim. Versus lo a resha. What does that mean? So fortunately, Rashi explains. Rather, kamahadir akivri shnei yomim. It's talking about the situation where a person buried 2 days before the regel. The regel oil minyan, that the regel will count as far as shloshim. The hasam vadi oil lo. So if you did the kvura before, so definitely the regel will count in that situation. Because at least you started the process of a kavah beregel lo yadana. However, if you did the burial on the regel, in which you never sat shiva, because you're not allowed to sit shiva during the regel, so then who says that the shloshim kicks in? So again, when it comes to before the regel, so shloshim definitely will kick in, and the days of the regel also count as part of the shloshim, the 30 days. The question again still is, what's the din if the regel is the first time that you do, when you do the kvura and there's no shiva? So does it count in that situation? So Esvei, regel oil minyan shloshim. So it says pretty clearly that it does count. Now Ketzad, cover b'tchilas regel. It says if you count, we will count if you do the burial at the beginning of the holiday, minus shiva. Then we count 7. Acha haregel. Umolach nanasas leidei acherim. Then a Rabbi is asking bo shekvar nisaskin bo beregel. Beregel oil. It says explicitly here that the regel does count. So tiyavta. In fact, that would be a refutation of sorts. Kiyosa Rabin, again, according to the one who says it's not oila. Kiyosa Rabin oimer Rav Yochanan fil cover beregel. Even if you bury the person in the regel, says Rashi, regel oil minyan shleishim. V'chein oirul Rav Elazar Rav Padas berei fil cover beregel. So even though we have apparently this tiyufta, nonetheless there are those shitas that will say that even if the kavur took place during the regel, the din is that the shloshim is oiluloi. Tanabana. Kiyam kviyas hamita shloisha yomim kodem regel. So similar to what our Mishnah said, let's say a person buried their dead 3 days before. You don't need to do anything afterwards. Divrei Rebbe Elazar. As we said, because as long as 3 days of Shiva counted, that's enough. Which is the general halacha, that it's not necessary for you to do 3 days before, but rather even 1 moment before. Zoktaisis, Kashali, the Ha'isli, Rav Yochanan, halacha kastam Mishnah, right? It's a problem because we know that Rav Yochanan holds like a stam Mishnah. So how could he say this? So so if you remember, that's why Rashi said on the Gemara, probably on yesterday's daf, on yesterday's Mishnah, that it was a Tais Sefer, that it really should say Sha'achas, because perhaps otherwise it would be difficult for how we can find these shitas are saying as they say. Amar Belezer Rav Shimon hein hein de Beis Shammai hein de Beis Hillel. To Beis Shammai yomrim shlosh yomim. Beis Hillel amrim afil yom echad, which therefore makes sense between Beis Shammai and Hillel. We only Beis Hillel. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav Chiya bar Rabbi Amar Rav Yochanan Amar Lei Rav Yochanan Rav Chiya bar Rabbi Rav Huna afil yom echad afil sha'achas. Even 1 moment. Rabbi Omer halacha Katan didan. The halacha is like our Tana. The Omer shleisha. You actually have to do 3 days of shiva. Ravina ikul asura de paras. So he went to this location. Amalei Rav Chavibel Ravina hilchos amai. So what is the maskan over here? What's the halacha? Amalei afil yemechad v'afil shachas. Yosef Rav Chia Barabba Rav Ami Rav Yitzchak Navcha. So they're all sitting together. Akila Rav Yitzchak. They were at this party of Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. Nafik milsa mibinayu. So some matter came from among them, which means that there was an issue of someone sitting shiva of avelus. So he asked the question, Menayin le'avelos shiva. How do we know that Avelos is supposed to be for 7 days? Where do we come up with that particular number? That I've turned your holidays into mourning. Machag Shiva af Avelos Shiva. So just like the holidays, as we know, are 7 days, so too when it comes to Avelos is 7 days. This is the saddening words in Amos. It says Taisus Yerushalmi Daik Ema Shmaina Kishmaina Dachag Mishani Shmini Regalifni Atzmahu. Very interesting, because if we want to say Sukkot, well, how about Shmini Atzeres? Well, Shmini Atzeres is, as we said, Pazar Kashav, the Gemara in Sukkah. It's a totally different holiday, so it's really only 7 days. Okay, so it's very fascinating. The reason why we know there's an element of Shiva is based on the verse V'hafakti Chagechem La'evel, that their holidays were turned from a holiday to a time of mourning. Ve'ematzeres T'chad Yoima. Maybe it's only a 1 day holiday, 1 day, and therefore 1 day of Avelos. How do we see 1 day? When it comes to a situation where there's only, you didn't hear about the person who died except for a very long time, you only have to sit Shiva for 1 day. That they turned the holidays into mourning. And therefore, because this is a more unusual circumstance, you only have to sit Shiva for that 1 day. If you just heard about it, that the person that's your relative died, so of course they're sitting Shiva, and there's the din of Shloshim. Only 1 day. So Ezi Kroi Ezi Rechaika. What does it mean close? Like 5 minutes, 30 minutes. So Kroi is Besach Shloshim. Rechaika La'achar Shloshim. Devar Rabbi Kiva. If you did not hear about it for 30 days, so then the din is that you only have 1 day of Shiva. No, it doesn't make any difference. Even if you didn't hear about it until a long time afterwards, you still sit Shiva once you find out about it, you still sit Shloshim. Normally we go like the Rabbim. Here we'll hold like Rabbi Kiva. Why? We always go more lenient when it comes to the dinim of Avelos. And therefore, Shemua Rechaika is only 1 day. Rabbi Chanina Asile Shemua Diavu Mebe Chazoi. Also, Kamed Rav Chisda Armele Shemua Rechaika Enohegas El Yom Echad. So again, we see that was the psak, that it was only for 1 day. Fine. Rav Nassan Barami Asale Shemua Diime Mebe Chazoi. So he went and he said over this statement. Asking the Rabbi, the one from the Rabbi, Armele Hari Amr Shemua Rechaika Enohegas El Yom Echad Bilvad. It's only 1 day. Esvei B'medim or Mamurim. When do we say that it's only noig for 1 day? Shemua Rechaika is only b'chamishi meisei mitzvah. Only when it comes to the 5 relatives, because we know that there are actually 7 relatives that you mourn for, but it's actually a 5 and 2 split. Your parents, the mother and father, are on a totally different level of sitting Shiva, but when it comes to the other 5, namely your son, daughter, brother, sister, or spouse, that is when we say it's 1 day. When it comes to your parents, for that there is a higher level of Avelos, and therefore, even if you didn't hear about it until after a while, you still have to say Shiva and Shloshim. Armul Yechida, he said that opinion is a yachid. Says Rashi, Rabbi Kiva lo shana aviv imo lo shana shar kravav. Rabbi Kiva doesn't make a chiluk. Vosfirul and kivase. We don't hold like that. So it's an important statement, because if we generally hold that we're lenient when it comes to dinim of Avelos, but in this situation, if it's a yechidah, so in that situation, we're not going to hold like it. Okay. The Sanya Masa, we learn like this. There's a story, Umeis Aviv Shel Rabbi Tzadok, Beginzak. That Ginzak, Rashi says, is a place. So Rabbi Tzadok's father died. He didn't know about it until after 3 years. Of all people, they asked Elisha ben Avuya, Uzakanim, She'imoi, V'amru Nog Shiva Shleishim. You keep the days of Shiva and Shleishim for your parents. Ukshemes B'noi Shel Rabbi Achia. But when the son of Rabbi Achia, as we see in Gemara Pesachim at the beginning of this, B'goyel Yoshel Shiva Shleishim. He also set Shiva and Shleishim for his son. Eini V'harav Bar Achua D'Rab Chia Dehu Bar Achte D'Rab Chia Kisot L'Hasam Armelei Abakayim. They went up to him and they asked him, "Is my father alive?" So they knew the truth, but they felt a little uncomfortable responding to this. This was Rav Chia said this to Rav. He said, "Is my father alive?" Right? Is he alive? As we continue to Chaf Amud Beis, Jarmalei Ima Kayemes. He said, "Your mother is alive." Says Rashi, Loshin She'elahu. So that's the next thing. So Amalei Ima Kayemes. So Amalei Abba Kayem. Your father is alive. Amalei Lashami Cholatzli Menaloi. So as Rashi says, Kalemer Shata Shayel El Avi Shal El Imi Shav Hi Achaischa. So they didn't say, yes, your father was alive. But when he said, is my father alive? They basically said, why don't you ask if your mother's alive? So they said, okay, is my mother alive? Why don't you ask me if her father's alive? And they went back and forth. It was clear that they just didn't want to end up saying the issue, that they both died. So Cholatzli Menali said, remove my shoes. And let me go to the bathhouse. Shmamina Tlosh. We see from the story 3 things. Shmamina Amel Asim and Ilsa Sandal. The fact that he said, take off my shoes, you're not allowed to wear shoes. Shmamina Shmur Chayka Eno Hegas El Yom Echad. He only had to sit Shiva for 1 day because there was a Shmur Chayka. Shmamina Mixas Yom Kakulo. We also see a partial day is like a day. We see it's 1 day even for parents, right? We see that that's the din. So the question is, how could you tell me that there's din Shleishim, there's din Shiva, L'chayr, when it came to his parents, it was only 1 day. So Achia L'chud, Rabbi Achia L'chud. So basically, the reality is that even though this is the statement, this is not a kasha because they're 2 separate people. What happens if, let's say, you heard about this and it was a shmur kroivel? Let's say someone's relative died 29 days ago, and you found out about it in the middle of the holiday, but you can't sit shiva then. Then it becomes after 30 days. So the din is, even though you heard about it, says Rashi, it becomes a shmur chayka because it's not just what you heard, it's what you can do about it. And therefore, since you can't say shiva until after the regel is over 30 days. Tani Rabbi Ada Demin Kisari committed Rav Yochanan Shema Shmur Krayba b'Shabbos. Let's say you heard about this on Shabbos, so Moed Shabbos Nasas Rechayka in Noig El Yom Echad. So it's the same thing. Because you can't sit Shiva on Shabbos, if that's when you heard about it, it was day 29 and a half. So that when Shabbos is over, now it's already past the 30 days. Now the Gemara asks a totally different question. Kaireya o enu kaireya? So the question is, what is the din about rending garments? Says Rashi, enu kaireya achshab the noig yom echad l'shmur chayka. The question is, do you rend your garments if it's a shmur chayka? So Rabbi Mani Omer Enu Kareya, you don't. Rav Chanina Omer Kareya, you do. Normally Rabbi Mani Rav Chanina, Enu Kareya. According to me, it says you don't. It's not a normal situation of Shiva because it was the Shmur Choka. You're not sitting for 7 days, so you don't do Kriya. What's this whole notion of doing Kriya? How would you do Kriya if there's no Din Shiva? Below? Well, what do you mean? Why not? He said as follows: Let's say a person just doesn't have a shirt to rend, and then he somehow gets a shirt that he's able to rip during Shiva. So then is kareya. He's supposed to rip it even in the middle of Shiva. However, after Shiva is over, if he got the shirt only after Shiva is completed, so it's too late. He doesn't rip it now. So only Rav Zera Basrei. So Rav Zera said after him, when do we say this is dafka b'chamisha mitzvah? When it comes to your other 5 relatives. When it comes to your parents, even if you only come across this shirt afterwards, you have to still rip. Says Rashi, Achar Shiva, Afagav the Lake of Shiva. So what do we see? Even though there's no Shiva because you already sat Shiva, so you do Kriya without Shiva. So Katan Yehil covered of the imo. It's not that really a chiyuv al Shiva of doing Kriya. It's just to show a proper covered to your parents, and that's the reason why once you come across a shirt, you have to rip it even then. Okay, let's see a couple of questions. Question 1: Mahi shmura chayka u'menola de'enu hegas el yom echad. So a shmura chayka is more than 30 days, and it's only like 1 day because the pasuk says v'hafachti chagechem le'evel, and Shavuos is a 1-day holiday, and therefore because of that. It's only 1 day. Question 2: if you don't have a shirt for this damlo achar shiva, him chayav likroa. So the other 5 relatives, you don't have to do so. However, of the imo for your parents, then you do. That was question 2. Okay, good. Weiter. Tanu Rabbi. So the Gemara continues as follows: Kol ha'omer beparshas kohanim shekoin metamu lehen. All the different things that are mentioned when it comes to the dinim of a kohen, that he becomes impure. Avel misabel alehen. The mourner will also mourn for them, says Rashi. Al oisin kroivin, on those 7 relatives. The Elohein, ishto, wife or spouse. Aviv imo, your parents. Achav achaiso, your siblings. Ubenovitoi, your sons and daughters. It's added on your brother and sister who and a sister who's a basua from your mother. Says Rashi, Shloma Aviv. Even though it may not be from your father, but nonetheless, even if it's like a half brother or sister, then also you would sit shiva for them. The Chayisa Nesua, when it comes to a married sister, bein me'aviv, bein me'imai. Ukashem shis abel aleihem, and just like you should sit shiva for them, kach misabel al shneim shalahen, divrei Rabbi Kiva. You should also sit shiva for the shneim, says Rashi, avi aviv, which is your grandparents, the al ben benai, and your grandchildren, the al ben bitai, the al ben achaiso. So Rabbi Kiva says that you don't only sit shiva for these 7 relatives, but even the shneim. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar omer enu misabel ela al ben benai. You would only sit shiva on your ben benai, on your grandchild, the al avi aviv, or on your grandparents. Those are the only shneim that one would sit shiva for. Chacham omrim kol shemisabel la misabel imoy. So what does that mean? Kolaimer, Rashi says misabel im aviv kishumas abel al ab shaloi. Nimsazem is abel al avi aviv. Because you have to sit shiva for your father, and he would be sitting shiva, so therefore you also have to sit shiva when his father died as well, as Rashi explains. Chachamim had a tanakama that he includes them. So igbenayu imo bebayis. It's referring to if they are in the house. Says Rashi that's in other words in front of the wife. Sitting shiva in front of the house. The Tanakama loy boy she aviv o beno imo babayis v'yoshiv imo chachamim bo imo babayis. Kiyos, since we're going to see here, kihad yirmulei Rab, as Rav said l'chi berei to his son. V'chein yirmulei Rab Huna l'Rabba berei. He said to his son, ba'apa, when you're in front of your wife, and let's say she's sitting shiva noig aveluta, then you should also be noig avelus. Lo apa lo tinhag aveluta. However, when you're not in front of her, you don't have to be noig avelus. So it's again another element of showing respect to your wife. That's how you're supposed to do. Moruk v'shachiv le bar chamua. So his wife was sitting shiva because of the bar chamua who had died. So savul mesiv le shiva shleishim. So he thought maybe he has to sit shiva and shleishim because of this. So al Rav Huna legabe. So Rav Huna went to him. He said as follows: Sud naisa. Rashi says sudas haregel, the meal. Boyes lamechal. Do I need to eat it? Which is also known as the sudas havra. Lo amra. So lo amru. It wasn't said l'kavod ishto el chamav achaisai. The only din is dafka on the father-in-law and your mother-in-law. So in other words, your wife's parents. So then there is this element of sitting shiva for them. The sign, or at least in front of your wife. The sign mishimes chamav ochamaisai. Someone whose mother-in-law or father-in-law died in Rishai l'kaifas ishto yos kochelos yos poikesas. We don't tell his wife that she should wear makeup. After all, she's an availus. You flip over your bed. Availus. You should actually keep the dinim of availus. V'chein he shemes chamiha o chamosa in rasha liyos kochelos liyos pokasas. She shouldn't just act like everything is fine if her husband's sitting shiva. She should also sit shiva. At least while she's in front of him. But Tanya Yidoch, yet we went elsewhere. The truth is, you're not supposed to do that, to force your wife to do that. But Emes Amr, the truth is, Mozeges lo asakos, she can pour a cup of wine for you, Matzas lo mita, and prepare a bed, and Rachetzas lo panav yadav raglov, and wash your hands, feet, etc. So l'chayr kashan hadadi. How could we allow this? I thought we said we don't allow. So we see that there is a chiluk when it comes to the mourning for her parents, your in-laws. So that, in fact, again, we're noyig avelus as well. The man should be noyig avelus, at least in front of her. However, when it comes to the other relatives in that situation, you could be koifas ishto to do all these different things. She could pour wine for you. She can make your bed, wash your face. All these different things are allowed to be done. Tanya Namihachi. To support this, we learned Amru lo Amru l'kavod ishto el chavachamaisim b'vad. We show kavod ishto, respect to our wife, only when it comes to her parents. When it comes to her sitting shiva for the other individuals, even though obviously we show respect, but it's not necessary for you to actually do avails. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Let's see a couple last questions. TA 10b. Shama Shmur Kraiva Beregel. Have you heard a Shmur Kraiva at the beginning of the holiday? Vanasas Rechaike B'Maitze Regel Ha'im Chai B'Avel Shiva V'Kriya. So the din is, well, when we say that is considered to be a Shmur Rechaika, because at the end of the day, it was 30 days. So therefore, only knowing 1 day of Avelus. However, when it comes to Kriya, we said it's a machlokas whether or not Kriya is done. Let's see if there's another question. Achaiso me'aviv o me'imo, me'imo vo me'aviv, im kain metamula, him es'abuleha b'moisa. I'm not sure if we... Yeah, so let's read what the answer is. Ein kohen metama el achaiso. A kohen can only become tameh, kohen hedget, if his sister died from his father, v'hi besula. Inyan avelus hosifo leha achosa me'imo. As we said, even if it's from the mother's side, bein nesua bein besula, whether she's married or besula. When it comes from the father's side, if she's married, even though you cannot become tameh, you still should mourn for them. So that was also, we saw this as well. TB, it was a hard question. TB10, Mishain lo cholok l'kroya v'nizdam l'achar shiva him chaya b'kriya. So we end up saying, when it comes to chancing upon a shirt, in the only after Shiva, so when it comes to your 5 relatives, we do not do Kriya. However, your parents, we do Kriya. Adkan.